Coming up on Wrestling Life.
It just never happens. I don't know why. I mean, some things really drastically just come to a halt, man. And Sam Shaw and I always laugh and talk about it. Like, we were both two guys that were really on this clear line to become these new stars for TNA, and all of a sudden it was just a complete halt. It's like 2014, I'm main eventing Manchester. 2015 in Manchester, I'm working a battle royal where I get eliminated in the first two people. You know what I mean? And it's just, you're like, okay, what happened here? Nobody ever tells you.
Welcome to Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that features real talk from real talent.
We're here for another awesome conversation on Wrestling Life, and boy, my guest today has one powerful story to share. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, my name is Ben Veal, and this show is all about celebrating wrestling's past, present, and future. My guest today made a name for himself in the NWA and TNA, went on to grow his wrestling legacy in NXT and the WWE, and last year he left the squared circle behind for a very different career path. A proud former US Marine, you may know him as Gunner, you may know him as Jaxson Ryker, or you may know him as the man behind those characters, Chad Lail. Chad, a very warm welcome to Wrestling Life. Thank you so much for your time today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Great intro. I appreciate the words there. Yes, all is well.
Well, you know, this show is all about, you know, celebrating life in all its richness, and you have led many a career path in your time. But let's bring everyone up to speed. So if anyone that hasn't caught up with you since you left WWE, you are out of the wrestling world now. As of 2023, you officially retired. So what are you doing with your life these days when it comes to purpose and direction?
I think it took me a while to learn or figure out what my purpose and direction was after leaving WWE in 2021, and we'll talk about that. But 2023 August, I had my last match in North Carolina, where I'm from, and at that time I was going through law enforcement school. Now, just back up a little bit. Law enforcement is something that is kind of in my family. Getting out of the Marine Corps in 2006, I was like, you know what? There's two things I can do. I can go into law enforcement, which I wanted to do, or I could chase my pro wrestling dream, which I really wanted to do. So, you know, obviously I chased the dream of wrestling. And when it started to come to an end, I just started kind of thinking, well, maybe I'm still young enough to get into law enforcement. So I currently work for my county, Iredell County Sheriff's Office here in North Carolina. It is an interesting job. Every day's got its own thing going on, but I do enjoy. It's wild, man. But I enjoy what I do. I get a chance to serve the community, and as cliche as that sounds, but our sheriff's a good Christian man who allows us to go into schools and talk to kids and just do different things that I enjoy as well.
How has your life in wrestling prepared you for life in law enforcement?
I don't know. I guess, I mean, if I got to body slam somebody, then, you know, I mean, it's going to happen. I think for me, really, just life experience in general, wrestling allowed me to travel the world, as you know, talk to different ethnic groups, different types of people, and do media stuff like we're doing now. So it really taught me, because in law enforcement, you got to know how to talk to people. You're either going to have to de-escalate a situation, or you're going to have to get aggressive with somebody. And I think Marine Corps, my upbringing, the way my parents raised me, and wrestling taught me like just how to interact with different styles of people, because you do that in pro wrestling. I mean, you would deal with, in wrestling, I dealt with, you know, crazy fans who literally wanted to fight me or sometimes probably stab me. But so I think that it helped me out a lot. Just learn how to deal with people.
Do you get recognized a lot? Because obviously you look quite different to your very bearded, hairy WWE days.
Yeah, a little different. I do. It's probably a handful of times a couple of folks have recognized, because when I got hired with the sheriff's office, the local newspaper did a spread and, you know, obviously said, hey, former pro wrestler from WWE, TNA, stuff like that. You know, the counties, I mean, we live in a relatively large county, but everybody kind of knows everybody, if that makes sense. So, I've been recognized a couple of times. I laugh it off half the time. They go, hey, you're that wrestler guy. And I'm like, I just laugh. I go, yeah, that's me.
How often do you get the old classic, "Oh, it's all fake, isn't it?" line from people?
I've only got that one time. Matter of fact, it was yesterday. I was helping a couple do some stuff on the side of the road to their car, and one of them started talking to me about wrestling and realized who I was, I think. And matter of fact, they were from I can't remember what part of England, but they've been here in the States for numerous years. But they said, well, so tell us, is it fake? And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I said, no, it's, we use the word predetermined. Like fake is a little extreme, but it's not too bad anymore.
Yeah. I love that it was a Brit that asked you that. Of all the people that could have asked you, it had to be a Brit, didn't it?
Oh yeah. They were super, super nice folks, like older folks, man. They've been here in the States for probably 15 or 20 years. But I started talking to them about how I'd been to Manchester and all these places in England. They were like, wow, you have traveled. So it's pretty fun.
Well, I mean, you really did get to travel the world, didn't you? Especially, we were talking off air before we started, but TNA, you were there during such a hot run, weren't you? When the company was selling out Wembley Arena and traveling around the UK, you got to see a lot of places, didn't you?
I did, man. And it was super cool for me to matter of fact, a lot of people will ask me, like, what's one of your best memories of not only just TNA, WWE, but pro wrestling in general? And I always tell them in 2014, in January, when Magnus and I main evented in Manchester Arena. And I'm like, this is one of those moments where I still have a picture here at the house where it's me standing on the top rope and I have my arms spread and all you see is like the crowd. I just remember in that moment, like going, wow, this is crazy. And so, yeah, I got a chance to meet with TNA. They sent us, I got a chance to do some stuff with CMLL in Mexico. We went to England. I mean, we were all over the place. They were on fire for so long.
I think a lot of US talent that come over to the UK for the first time are surprised by just how rowdy our crowds are. I mean, we love our wrestling, but we'll also tell you if there's something happening we don't like.
Yeah, that is true. But I mean, because I got a chance with not only with TNA, but after my TNA run in between that and WWE, to go back over and do some like independent shows, like in Plymouth and I can't remember the other towns I went to, but they would pack these folks in the bars or wherever we would wrestle, old churches, and the crowds were just, I mean, yeah, depending on I guess what part of England you were in, but yeah, if they didn't like something, they were going to tell you, and it was funny to me.
So look, I mean, so you're obviously serving now as a policeman. You before that though, this isn't your first time serving your country, so obviously you had a long time as a US Marine. So growing up, was the military something that you kind of anticipated would be in your life?
I think it was kind of on the back burner. Once again, like I have a family, a good uncle of mine that's passed away recently. He was in law enforcement, but all of my dad and then all of his brothers, which were I think 4 of them, were all in the military. So as a kid, I'd go into my uncle's house who was in the Army, and they just had kind of this, I always called it the Wall of Fame in my aunt and uncle's house. It was all of my uncles and my grandfather and pictures in their uniform. And I was just like, I guess as a kid, I'm looking and thinking, it'd be kind of cool to be a part of that wall, just a lot of memories and just what, men of the family. So come 2001, obviously when 9/11 happened, I was out of high school, graduated 2000, 9/11 happened in 2001. And I think it really kind of set a fire to me and just going, you know what, I think it's a good time to go fight for your country. And here, here's a time where, I'm not going into the military where everything's peaceful. We're going into the military when the world is at war. And of course, mom and dad were stressed out and worried, but it's something that I think as a kid, like I said, you always played soldier and thought you were going to be in the military, but it really never hit me until kind of right after high school. And then when 9/11 happened, and I chose the Marine Corps just because, and I always say this, I respect all 4 branches of service. Dad was in the Army, uncles were in the Air Force. And I had one uncle that was in the Marine Corps in the 70s. And he'd always tell me, like, just whatever you do, don't join the Marine Corps. But I always said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And so I chose to go to the United States Marine Corps. And like we spoke a moment ago, man, it really transitioned me basically from a boy to a man. It taught me how to be a man. It got me out of my hometown and made me realize, like, there's so much more to the world. And as my dad always told me as a kid, like, you can do anything you set your mind to. I didn't really understand that, I don't think, until I went through Marine Corps boot camp. Like, you can push your body past limits. And that helped me a lot in life.
I assume a lot about being a Marine is about your mentality and about reprogramming your mind as much as it is your physical body.
It is. And people say, like, they brainwash you. I don't call it brainwashing. I think it's just preparing you to, just like going into law enforcement. Like, you have to carry yourself a certain way. In the military, there's a huge chance that you're going to go to combat and experience things that not any normal person's going to see, just like I do as a deputy here out on the streets. So it was like reprogramming yourself in a way to, but I was always good, being about, like, kind of like the pro wrestling world. As a pro wrestling superstar, it's still weird for me to use that word, but I guess that's what I was.
Yeah.
It was, when I came home, I knew, like, okay, I had to shut that off. Like, I wasn't living that 100% every day. So, as the Marine, when I was at home, like, I was me. And that's how I have to remember to, I guess, live my everyday life.
I think that's helpful, isn't it? I think that's one of the reasons that I set up this show is, we see all these larger than life superstars on TV that kind of transcend, real life. But at the end of the day, you're all normal people with normal lives. And I think it's really helpful if you can compartmentalize that part of your life. Yes. And then be a normal person away from, just be Chad away from having 20,000 people or whatever, because it's not healthy, is it? It's like
no. You got to have, I always heard, even here in law enforcement, the big thing they preach to us going through school was, like, be sure you know how to, like you said, compartmentalize. And when you get home, what are you doing to help you cope with, God forbid, a murder scene or whatever you go through? Or for me, wrestling for 23 years, what am I doing to bring myself down from wrestling in front of 20,000 people or traveling across the world and I've been down this road before, instead of, like, going to a bar and getting, partying all the time. So what was my escape? And I think my escape was always, like, I always get the comment of, like, oh, you're in really good shape to be 42 years old or whatever. And I always tell the folks, like, that was my drug growing up. That's what kept me out of trouble. Like, I knew my escape was the gym. And obviously we'll speak about my daughter. When she was born, when I was home, like, that was everything right there. That's all I focused on.
How old's your daughter now?
She is 7, so she'll be 8 in September. So 7 years old, man. I always say she's going on like 25 because she's full of, she's got an amazing personality. She's great.
I love, just to talk dad life for a second. I love all the pace you're sharing on social. She's clearly your world, as my boys are today. Yeah. How have you changed as a man since becoming a dad?
It's actually, I always used to, me and my her mother, ex-wife, we always talk and laugh about it now. Like, we'd always pray to the Lord to, like, teach us patience. And I think that when my daughter was born 7 years ago, like, throughout the 7 years of her life, he's definitely taught me patience. But she's taught me that there is more to life than just fame and money and all the other stuff that I live. Like, I have a legacy now that that is my daughter Ava, that I am her, and I always say I'm her standard. So when she grows up and gets married, starts dating, whatever it may be, like, she's going to remember how daddy treated her. So I think that's my main focus in life is, how can I be a good father? I'm going to mess up. I have to realize that. And that's hard for me to swallow sometimes, but that's really just kind of like how she's changed my world. She's definitely made me a better person.
I tell you what, whichever young man has to take her out to prom and has to turn up on your doorstep and get your seal of approval, I feel for him.
Oh yeah, I already told her even now. I said, one day when you go out on your first little date, I said, he better open the car door for you, because that's what I do for the most part. Every time I open the car door for her, get her in and shut the door. So it's like she's going to remember that. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be one tough guy who has to have that first conversation with daddy, isn't it?
Yeah, he is. We find out what I did and what I do.
Yeah, it does a bit of research. So look, you said growing up, obviously, playing soldiers is one thing, but also I know that you were a very young wrestling fan like I was. So was it about 5 years old that you started watching wrestling?
It was 5, and I can vividly remember that. Like, Mom has a couple pictures of when I was a kid, sitting with, like, Hulk Hogan tank top on that I had. I had a Junkyard Dog shirt I would always wear. And she'll always say too, if she ever gets asked, like, that's what he always said he wanted to do. And I remember just being 5 years old. I was into obviously superheroes. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger was huge for me as a kid. I watched all his movies. So I put these two worlds together when I saw pro wrestling for the first time. I remember thinking, man, these guys are larger than life. Like this is everything packed into one that I love. So of course, like growing up, Hogan was my main one, Macho Man, and guys like that. Like it just mesmerized me, Ben. It gave me this escape as a child, because it wasn't my being made fun of as a kid wasn't extreme for me. I mean, I was bullied just like any other normal child is. But for me, like my escape was just this pro wrestling, and not a lot of my friends really cared about it. A lot of them, they were into it, but man, every Saturday morning, I remember I'm sitting there watching Saturday morning wrestling.
It's interesting because I'm exactly the same. I mean, I suffered quite a lot with being bullied when I was quite young, and wrestling was where I went. It was my safe space that I went home to, and I watched old wrestling. I'd often dive back into like early 1991 shows and just kind of relive WrestleManias that I loved. But it was interesting. There was a brief period where maybe around 1995 when wrestling was probably at its least cool. Like, remember the dark days of WWF? And I stayed as a fan. I remember getting bullied mercilessly during that period for liking WWF when I was about 11 years old. And then 2 years later, all of those same kids that had bullied me were suddenly wearing Austin 316 and Rock t-shirts. I was like, hang on a second, still wrestling.
Bandwagon
just
fans.
Called out. Yeah, exactly. So no, I was there during the Mantar and TL Hopper days. I mean, I stuck with that product, so.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because like a lot of people are saying like the dark times of wrestling, like we talk about like that 93, 94, 95 era. But if you go back and watch some of those like manias and some of the matches that even WCW was putting on, I mean, those were times when like the Hollywood Blondes were running wild. I mean, there was a lot of good wrestling. I mean, not 96 when, Austin obviously changed the world of professional wrestling, but there was some like really good stuff going on and really good matches.
Yeah, there was. I think when it's the dark times as much for characters. I mean, especially in WWF in 1995, when every single character was like Bob Sparkplug Holly and Mantar and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, absolutely, and really, really formative years, and some of the biggest stars who would then define that whole Attitude Era. The likes of Steve Austin and Triple H and Mick Foley, all were really kind of making a name for himself during that 93 to 95 period. Great time to be a fan.
Definitely. I still have a lot of VHS tapes and DVDs from a lot of those old times, man. It's just, it's really cool to go back and watch a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I love that period of time. And, it's such an honor to now get to do what I do and get to speak to loads of those guys that I grew up watching. And, had Repo Man on recently. Repo Man was my guy as a kid, I had Papa Shango on recently, that these are all guys that absolutely were, they were my action figures, and now they're conversations, and it's awesome. So you go from being a kid, you grow up, you go through your time in Iraq. At what point does wrestling become something that you think this is a viable career path for me?
Well, a lot of folks don't know because they think that, once I got to the Marine Corps, like I dove right into pro wrestling. Well, pro wrestling really, so I mentioned I went in the Marine Corps. It was 2002 when I actually went to Parris Island for a boot camp. So graduated high school in 2000. So that was May of June or somewhere. Now, August of 2000, I actually started training as a local like pro wrestler with the local gentleman I'd met, and kind of doing random shows here and there, maybe one, maybe two a weekend. So even in the Marine Corps, like from 2002 to 2006, I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So it's probably 5.5, 6 hours from where I'm from. So those weekends, there was a buddy of mine that actually wrestled in the Marine Corps with me, that we would travel practically every weekend, unless we were deployed or had something to do with the Marine Corps. We would travel every weekend to my hometown, stay at my dad's house, wrestle on a Saturday night in a local town in South Carolina, Georgia, and then drive back Sunday night and do it all over again every weekend.
Wow.
So I was doing independent wrestling while I was in the Marine Corps. And so when I got out in 2006, I was like, okay, like I can't just stay. And then there's independent times. I had a lot of opportunities, but being in the Marine Corps kind of put a hold on a lot of that. But getting out of the Marine Corps in 06, I realized, all right, it's time to really chase this if I want it. It's not going to be easy. And that's what I made connections with, it used to be NWA Wildside down in Georgia. It went over to NWA Anarchy. So Bill Barron's, I mean, there's so many names that went through that place. I got connected with those guys through a good friend of mine, Jason Justice. Basically got our foot in the door there, which because they were doing local TV and kind of some national TV stuff. But it was all local stations, but there was a lot of connections that came through there. Terry Taylor would come through and watch. Bill Barron's had kind of good connections with Tommy Dreamer and Bruce Pritchard and all these names that but you don't know really what they do. So that's really where I started to chase after it, Ben, and really where my career started to take off, being able to work not only NWA Anarchy, but Bill got a liking to me and it catapulted me into with the Chicago. I went all through the Midwest. I got to go overseas. I got to carry the national championship and just all kinds of different things, which really helped catapult my career. So started chasing it very, very hard. I would say probably beginning of 2007.
I mean, you had a long run with that national title, didn't you? I mean, what did you learn from your time in NWA, and how did that prepare you for TNA?
I will cheap plug here, like Mick Foley would say. I believe I'm still the one to carry it the longest. Maybe they've beat me on that, but it was 23 months. So I think what really helped me with preparing myself for my TNA run was throughout my NWA run, I had the opportunity as the national champion, like I said, to travel. They were grooming me to be the world champion of NWA because I was working a huge feud with Adam Pearce. And once I got signed with TNA, obviously that got squished. But I think it really opened up the door because when you wrestle a lot of independent shows within North Carolina, South Carolina, you're really wrestling the same guys over and over and over again. So for me, it was a learning experience. I was not all the time. I don't want to sound like I'm egotistical here, but I was better than a lot of the guys I was wrestling in these independent shows. So what happened with NWA was it got me out of that zone and put me in the ring with guys that were extremely good. Adam Pearce, I wrestled, Ace Rockwell down at NWA. Just all these guys I got a chance to wrestle throughout the United States really started to make me better. And that's really what it was. I always tell guys now if I go do a signing or whatever it is, hey, what can we do to get our name out there? And I always say, get out of your hometown. Get out of these small independent shows. These are good to wrestle. They're good to be around. But start wrestling guys that are better than you. And I think that's what Bill was really pushing me to do, is just step out of my comfort zone and better myself.
So if you're there in the NWA and you're being groomed for the World Championship, how does it come about that you end up moving on to TNA then?
I know I was kind of disappointed. Well, I don't want to say disappointed because my career went the way it's supposed to, because I was really looking forward to being the NWA World Champion. Me and Adam had a really good connection with one another and worked really well. So I guess I was national champion, and during that run, I was this was 2008 timeframe. Terry Taylor had come down to TNA, kind of watched a couple shows, started talking to me about, hey, this is things I think you need to improve on. Like, what are your goals? And I just told him straight up, like, I want to be in WWE. You know, that was my ultimate goal as a kid. He was one of the bookers and agents for TNA at the time. So really, even in my NWA national title run, I was still doing extra spots for WWE when they would come to town. And then TNA kind of started to trickle us in, me and Michael Judas, and at the time, Chemo, all three of us came in. Terry said, I don't have a wrestling spot for you, but what we do have is this on-air security gig where you guys are going to look like real security and not going to be like the ring security that you see on TV. You guys will kind of be the enforcers for Dixie Carter. And that was really, and in my mind, like, some guys were like, well, I'm too good for that. Like, but in my mind, I'm thinking, that's my foot in the door. Like, this is my opportunity, you know, if they let us step in the ring to kind of show what I can do. And that's really how it happened, man. So I guess 2010 was about the time where we were looking to do the world title run for NWA. And that's when TNA offered us like kind of a baseline contract. We're going to pay you X amount of dollars. Because from that time where we started security, they started to kind of trickle us in where Dixie or Jeff Jarrett would put us in the ring. If he had a match, he'd be like, well, I'm not going to wrestle, but you're going to wrestle my guys. And he would bring us out and we'd do the deal, you know, which was awesome. It gave us opportunity to step in the ring. So that was the time right about 2010 where they offered us baseline contracts. Hey, this is what we're offering you per show. And then once that happened, like I was basically stripped of I dropped the national title, and the world title run kind of faded away because, we were under contracts, so they couldn't have me on TV getting beat if they were putting the world title on.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, I mean, TNA was really, really heating up at that point. That's kind of, Hogan and Bischoff had entered the company, kind of got Sting there, Kurt Angle there, really great homegrown talents like Bobby Roode and James Storm, who we will no doubt talk about shortly. Really great crop of talent. And I remember when kind of Gunner first burst on the scene, and you just had such a kind of distinctive character and aura about you. I mean, obviously the Gunner name is rooted in your role in the US Marines. Did you suggest that name, or how did that creative come about?
They gave us the idea of we pitched a couple names, and that was one of them I pitched, and it did come from like the military. So like I was motor T operator by job title in the Marine Corps, but when we were overseas, I was mainly a lot of the times you'll see the guys on top of the truck manning like the weapon, the 50 cal or whatever it may be. So I was like, well, maybe I'll use the name Gunner, and it kind of clicked. I mean, it was one name. They were big in those days, and it stuck. So they were really cool with, hey, let's just run with that. And they kind of let me do my own thing with character wise. Like I knew I wasn't going to be this big cartoon flashy character, because it's really what wrestling kind of steered away from. Excuse me. Now you had certain guys, Jay Lethal, come in doing the macho and all that stuff. But
brilliant.
Yeah, man, I love it. But for me, it was just like, okay, well, that's just not who I am. Like, I always like, nobody's going to be a Steve Austin. Don't get me wrong. But I always thought, well, Steve Austin just came in as this, he was just fighting all the time. He was just mad all the time. And that's really, I think it's kind of where I latched on to. It's like, who am I as a person? Yes, I can be entertaining and funny if I need to be, but that's really what I did with the Gunner characters, just ran with the aggressive side.
Yeah, well, I mean, it worked. I mean, as I said before we started recording, I mean, I remember that, that really hot run you had early on, and especially when you were, you got really far in the Bound for Glory series, and I genuinely thought that they were going to move towards putting the world title on you. I thought you were going to be one of those characters that came right through, burned through talent. Was there ever any discussions about you becoming world champion with TNA?
There wasn't really ever a significant, like, hey, let's sit down and talk about this is what we're going to do. Because John Gaburik was the head of the talent at the time when Magnus and I wrestled in 2014. From what I understand through whether we talking to certain talent or some of the writers, like they were pushing me towards that. So once we did the deal where James Storm turned on me in Wembley, we had this whole big storyline, which I enjoyed. They were working to build the Gunner character, which I understand. Like they wanted to, and to me, man, like I sat and watched, like, here's the Gunner character come out in 2012 when I really got out of the security gear, where crowd was kind of like, nah, who is this guy? Like, but that's what you expect. But by 2014, 2015, even in the States, people, they knew. I was getting, cheers, and some people liked me, some people didn't like me. But that's the beauty about pro wrestling. But when I went to Manchester and just like felt the crowd that night, because that was a hard one. Sorry to rewind, but Magnus and I were talking, because Magnus is kind of from that area. He goes, this is going to go one of two ways. We're in the locker room talking. He goes, they're going to either boo you and love me, or opposite. And man, it was completely opposite. Like they hated him and they cheered for me. So I think there was talks of putting the title on me eventually. But it just never happened. So I don't know why. I mean, some things really drastically just come to a halt, man. And Sam Shaw and I always laugh and talk about it. Like we were both two guys that were really on this clear line to become these new stars for TNA. And all of a sudden it was just a complete halt. Like 2014, I'm main eventing Manchester. 2015 in Manchester, I'm working a battle royal where I get eliminated in the first two people. You know what I mean? And it's just, you're like, okay, what happened here? Nobody ever tells you.
It's the fascinating world of pro wrestling, which is why I'm still a fan 35 years on, because it doesn't matter how much talent someone has. It's not all about ability. There are so many intangibles that you never know when a push may happen or a push may end. But I loved the stuff you did with James Storm. I thought he's such a great performer. I think both the tag team that you had together and then obviously your rivalry afterwards. I mean, he really is a veteran of the game. I mean, what did you learn from working with James?
He is, and him and I always laugh and go, we really wish we could have ran with the tag team a little longer. It was kind of like, hey, you guys are the champions, and then next week you're not the champions. You're going to fight each other. But man, it was really cool storyline for me. I think it was one of the first big storylines I've been part of, where we actually brought my real life father into the situation. Like, we just had these. To me, they let James and I kind of run, and luckily James had been there long enough to where he kind of had the pull to say, okay, well, let us do this. But him and I got to come together and come up with so many different ideas. And I think with James, I learned to just I think it brought me out of kind of my comfort zone as a competitor, and he would help push me. I mean, because you got to look at the stuff him and Bobby Roode did as tag teams. I mean, they've some very historic matches. Yeah. You know, even James is a singles competitor in TNA, some very historic matches. I mean, he's worked with, Kurt and Sting and everybody. And I think it really showed me that I could be on that main event level. Like, James never pulled back and anything. He pushed me. And there was times where we had these, I always tell folks, all those matches they saw on TV for the 6-month stint, I mean, dude, we were doing, I guess, 3 or 4 house shows a week, and still doing some of the same hardcore style matches. My body was shot after 6 months of doing that. But, you asked the question, like, what did I learn from James? And like I said, James pushed me out of my comfort zone. It showed me that I could be a main event guy. And every single night we had something different to tell. But it also helped me creatively come up with new ideas, because we did do a 6-month feud. That's very unheard of now in pro wrestling. So for instance, Elias and I in WWE, like we had a 3-4 week feud. We never had to come up too many ideas, but James and I, we always still talk about it every once in a while. Him and I will chat. We enjoyed that feud a lot, man. And getting a chance to bring my dad in, who is the one as a kid took me to WCW, WWF shows, was a huge Sting fan, and just to have my dad front row and be there, I was like, man, this is really cool. So
I bet he loved that, didn't he?
He did. He got a chance to meet Sting too. Sting was one of our favorites growing up. And I remember when I wrestled Sting in 2012, he lost his mind, but he did, man. He got a chance to go backstage and meet everybody. He was like a kid in a candy store, which is funny.
How was that for you, wrestling Sting? Because I mean, I've spoken with Mark Mero, who's spoken to me about almost like having an out of body experience when he wrestled Ric Flair for the first time, because he could see the little kid Mark Mero watching Ric Flair in the 70s, and then suddenly he's there in the ring with him. What was it a bit like that for you with Sting?
Yeah, it was. It's funny because I see your Mark Mero figure back there on the wall. So I'm good buddies with Mark. We actually spoke yesterday. But back to your question. So I remember getting to the arena that day, and Terry Taylor comes up to me and goes, "Hey, kid." I was like, "Hey, Terry, how you doing?" "Well, you're wrestling Sting tonight." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." He goes, "And you're going to win." I went, "Wait, what?" So I'm like mind blown the whole day. And I remember going into the locker room and talking and just going up to Sting like, "Hey, sir," kind of introducing myself. We'd met a few times. What do you want to do tonight? He goes, "Well, think about it. Just let me know what you want to do." And I'm like, this ain't right, man. So, because the old school part of me says, no, the veteran calls the match. Long story short, I'm standing in the ring. The lights go down, his music hits. And I remember in the back going, all right, Chad, soak this moment in, because this may be the last time you get a wrestling. And I'm standing in the ring, his music hits, and I'm staring up the ramp, and I see him coming down. And all I can think about is, man, as a child, Surfer Boy Sting was like the god to me of pro wrestling. And it really just blew my mind to sit and think, like, I'm a part of this. And I remember just sitting there going, thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. Like, it was just surreal to me. And then getting a chance to be in the ring with him, I think we had maybe an 8 or 10 minute match. Getting a chance to call stuff in the ring to him. Not only that, but getting a win over him, whether it's predetermined or not. Like, who cares? It's one of those things where it's like, man, it was a really, really cool moment, Ben, for a 5-year-old boy to sit and go, man, you're wrestling Sting tonight.
Well, the thing is, predetermined or not, I mean, if someone like Sting or The Undertaker or Hulk Hogan says you're going over, you're going over. If they say you're not, you're not. That's the thing. Like,
yeah.
And my perception of Sting during that TNA run was that he was just all about elevating the talent and giving opportunities to younger people. It's like he was there literally to help pass the torch time and time again.
Yep, that's the kind of person Sting is. Like, just talking to him throughout all those times in TNA, he is that kind of person. He cared about the young talent. He would always come up and he would watch and he would give me pointers and like just see different things that he either liked or didn't like, or just his opinion. But he was all about the younger guys, and he would tell you that in a heartbeat. And Hogan really, people talk bad about Hogan. I never had one bad moment with Hogan. Hogan, I worked with from 2010 till he left in, I guess, the 14 time frame or somewhere. And then when I saw Hogan again at WrestleMania in Tampa in 2021, the first time I'd seen him in, gosh, I guess 7 years or so, he remembered me. And I went up, shook his hand, and thanked him for just opportunities in TNA. And he told me, like, he was super happy for me, good to see me. Remember my name. So I knew it, one of those things, like, because you go pro wrestlers, like, oh, yeah, I remember you, but they don't know who you are. Yeah. But Hogan remembered my name, man, called me Gunner, which was funny. But just moments like that will always kind of be near and dear to me.
How was that WrestleMania for one in Tampa? Because that was so surreal to watch that as a fan. Because obviously that was the first in a whole year of the empty arenas and the Thunderdome. I felt really emotional watching that show, and because we were on our third super tight lockdown in the UK by that point, so I wasn't even able to have a friend round to watch WrestleMania. Like for me, WrestleMania was always get the buddies together, and that's what we do every year. That WrestleMania, I had to watch that on my own, and it was so surreal to be watching 25,000 people. What was it like to be out in that crowd again after going through the trenches of Thunderdome?
It was amazing. Finally, I mean, because the Thunderdome, when it first started, we were all kind of in shock. Like, man, this is weird. And eventually became normal, where they had the screens and the crowd kind of chimed in. But when we found out that they were doing a live crowd in Tampa, I think we were all very like, finally, like we just take a, and I remember we got out on stage. I guess as the show started, they do the what's the name of the song? I shouldn't be. It's not the national anthem, but the God Bless America song or whatever they do every WrestleMania. And, just kind of sitting there and looking at the people and just hearing that cheer and that roar come back, and then getting a chance to go out there that night, Elias and I, with Shane and Braun, and just being a part of a crowd that, like, you can finally feel some electricity instead of having to, like, just have TV screens and fake noise chimed in. But man, it was real, because so I guess you could say, like, it was cool because I was part of history. Like, that was the first Mania back. And it just felt really cool to be a part of that. And as a kid, like, one of my main goals was to be a part of a WrestleMania, whether it be wrestling a match or somehow involved, and I achieved that goal. So
as a kid, my dream was to go to a WrestleMania, and that this year I achieved that goal in Philly. So we've both ticked it off the list.
Good.
So when you're in the Thunderdome, did they actually pipe in the crowd noise then? So you weren't wrestling in a...
They did. Yeah. Well, and when COVID first hit, like, we were down in Orlando, it was right when the Forgotten Sons got called to SmackDown, and it was in the Performance Center. There was no crowd. And I mean, dude, when I say, like, these days were long, we would start at 11 in the morning, and one night we didn't get done until about 3 in the morning. So you're looking at almost a 24-hour day because, and I'll tell the tale, I'm not there anymore, but it was like they would do these matches and they were pre-recorded. We would do 2 or 3 tapings. And if Vince didn't like something in the middle of the match, he would say cut and make them redo it again. And I'm like, and that's why it took so long, because it was just, instead of just letting them work through a mistake, it had to be perfected. You know what I mean? It was very, very hard. But the Thunderdome was cool. When we moved down to Tampa, had the actual screens and a little bit of the crowd, because it kind of gave us something to vibe off of and feel, opposed to just like nothing, crickets literally. It did, but they were chiming noise in, kind of crowd noise, applause, boos. So at least gave us something to kind of react to.
I thought AEW's setup during COVID worked much more for me as a fan, like small, just having the talent around, but at least they're in something that resembled a stadium a bit more, and it felt a little bit more like you were watching normal wrestling. Like I couldn't bear the Thunderdome period. I had to switch off. It depressed me too much, to be honest.
It was rough.
I just went back to watching later 90s wrestling when there were crowds. But anyway, let's not go off on a COVID tangent. I want to talk about your kind of your run, your going from TNA to NXT. So what led to you being signed? And also, was there ever any talk about you keeping the Gunner name? Because obviously that was part of your pre-wrestling identity.
Well, yeah. So I left TNA 2015 when I got released from my contract. Instantly, I started doing some independent stuff. Started touching base. I was good buddies with Dash Wilder at the time, and started talking to him like, "Hey, do you think there's an opportunity for me to come in?" Long story short, he was good buddies with Regal, good buddies with Edge. Regal ended up calling me, talking to me, and said, "Hey, best I can do right now." And this was 2015, mind you. So 2017, you fast forward 2 years and see that what Regal told me in 2015, I get you in for a tryout, like a kind of a, not one of these big tryouts like WWE does now where there was like 30 or 40, kids coming in. This was like a very kind of, he called it an intimate tryout. There was 5 of us that came to the Performance Center. He said, Hunter's looking to try and build the NXT brand, which is funny to think about now, hearing that. He goes, I can get you in, at least get you tried out, get you seen. I was like, perfect, let's do it. So I went down there. They got me in a hotel for the week, did the tryout. But fast forward, it was 2017 before I ever got the call back to get hired with WWE. And when that happened, man, it was a dream come true. But, they said, I remember talking to Regal, and he said, we want to offer you this contract. Like, you got to move down to Florida, be a part of the Performance Center. And he goes, I know you've had many years of experience. I don't think this is like a developmental thing, but Hunter is really pushing to work on building the NXT as a third brand. And I really didn't think about, like, what does that mean at the time until really now looking back and seeing where that gold and black brand like blew up. I mean, it was at one time, my opinion, better than Raw or SmackDown.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was because Hunter had the reins on it and Vince didn't have any reins on it. So yeah, I moved down. My daughter was 8 months old at the time. We packed a U-Haul, moved from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, all the way down to Orlando, Florida, and just started kind of from scratch there. Like, it was in the Performance Center every day. And I was 30, 35, 36 at the time, having to take bumps every day. And I was like, man, my body hates me right now. But that's really where the transition from TNA to NXT led, is just keeping in touch. That's what I did. I was resilient. I had to try out in 2015. I remember Regal pulled me into kind of an office after that tryout and said, hey, you did really well this week. This is where we are. We're not hiring anybody right now as far as new talent, but just keep in touch with me. So once a month, I'll just send him an email. Hey, just want to touch base, see where everything is. And he would always reply. I do give him that credit, or he would call me sometime and say, hey, listen, like, you're still on the radar. We're just not bringing anybody in yet until Hunter wants to pull the trigger on what he wants to do with NXT. And I always thought, well, man, that's probably just an excuse because I've been down wrestling road before. And that's just one of those things. Instead of telling me we don't want to hire you, like, this is what we're saying. But I will say in 2017, right before WWE offered me a contract, TNA had reached back out and wanted to do a tag team with Crimson and I, and had the offer on the table and all this stuff, Ben. And the offer I left there making a certain amount of money, and I was going back to TNA on this offer that was like almost half of what I had been making. I'm like, man, as a man, as a father, I can't do that. So what did I do? I told TNA, I said, give me a little bit of time. Let me think about it. Man, I called Dash, Cash Wheeler at the time and said, hey, dude, this just happened. What do you suggest I do? He said, give me a couple minutes. And dude, no lie, probably 5 or 10 minutes later, William Regal called me and said, I heard that TNA wanted to hire you. I said, yeah, this is what it is. He goes, well, I just talked to Hunter. We're going to hire you. And I was like, it just happened. And I'm thinking, like, this is like a fairy tale. Like, it does not always just happen this way, but that's literally how everything took place. I didn't want to burn a bridge with TNA, but at the same time, as a father, a husband at the time, and a man, like, I had to do a business decision here, and it paid off. For whatever 4 years I was with WWE, part of a video game, WrestleMania, part of the black and gold brand that guys like you and others always talk to. Go, man, NXT was on fire, and it was. I mean, we were selling out arenas. and all kinds of shows.
I mean, NXT was what got me. I mean, I've never stopped watching wrestling for 35 years, Chad. But NXT was what got this young fan hooked again. It's like 2015 NXT was finally when I had stopped realizing why I was in love with wrestling anymore. I just stopped feeling excited. I hadn't felt excited about the product for about 10 years. And it finally got me back. I've got to be honest, if a wrestling fan in me would have loved to have seen a Crimson and Gunner tag team, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, I was looking forward to that. But like I said, business decision-wise, we just didn't. It would have been fun because we had tried to push that when we were in TNA. Like after Storm and I, Crimson kind of came together with me, and being both military guys, him in the Army, and we had some ideas of some things. And they just – TNA went through this weird phase, like right after the Storm feud, where I don't know if it was a change of leadership or just the company was starting to kind of crumble from the inside or something, where they just didn't want to listen to anybody's ideas unless you were higher up on the totem pole. And, unfortunately, I think they really shot themselves in the foot with that because they had a lot of hungry talent that was willing to do a lot of things, to try and be stars. But, yeah, I think that would have been a cool tag team, man.
How did your time? How did TNA as a company compared to WWE?
As far as like leadership, or just in general, as far as like
just generally being there as a talent and the experience.
Golly, man. So I don't have any complaints or gripes about TNA. Other than like sometimes it's like I really wish they would have done this, but I think I had a lot more fun in NXT traveling than a lot of my prior career with TNA. And I've had some fun times in TNA with traveling, but NXT, it was like this brotherhood, you know what I mean? Like we would all travel on a bus together in NXT. We'd all fly together, same hotels. And it was just something about knowing that we were young talent. And even though I was 36, 37, whatever, we were young talent that was given this opportunity by Triple H and by the company to be entrusted with this NXT brand. And TNA had already kind of built their name, and they were bringing in Hogan and these guys, but TNA had a hard problem sometimes of letting this young talent just run loose. And they would see that you're going somewhere, and then me and Sam would always say, even James would talk about it, they would just pull back the reins. Like, no, you get a little too far out there. But NXT, man, for the most part, Hunter was so approachable. Even at TVs, you could go up to Hunter anytime and say, hey, I got an idea I'd like to pitch to you. He would listen. He would think about it. He would say, all right, let's talk about it a little more, or I got something better. And most of the time, Ben, when he'd say, I got something better, and he would explain it to you, you'd be like, holy crap, like that's amazing. So NXT, I think professionally, I had a lot of fun because we were allowed to just kind of be ourselves. We were, like I said, these guys given an opportunity to help NXT catapult into that new horizon as a third brand. And it just meant a lot, man. I mean, just to sit and see what we as talent did with the black and gold brand, how we were selling out arenas, like I said, selling out venues everywhere, and just the reaction from the crowd. It's kind of like being a part of a wrestling cult. Like ECW had their own like wrestling cult in a way. I mean, NXT was the same. You had NXT fans that could not stand Raw or SmackDown. Yeah. And all they wanted was NXT. And so it was kind of like being a part of I always liken it to like, if I wanted to be a rock star growing up as a kid for like 2 months. And I realized I can't play instruments, so it's not going to work out. But we were kind of rock stars, man. Yeah. It made you kind of feel like on a smaller scale, what it felt like in like the Attitude Era. You know what I mean? I mean, those were huge times, but like we were kind of rock stars. It was cool.
It was a weird time to kind of, because obviously I'd been I'd watched Impact for a lot of years, and you suddenly got this time where in NXT you've got yourself, you've got Bobby Roode, you've got Samoa Joe, all kind of being presented as like these up and coming talents when you've all main evented TNA, and then you've got AJ Styles who's gone straight into the world title picture. It was interesting how some people had to go via the NXT route, some people bypassed that, but generally it felt like you needed to kind of learn the WWE, or at least you needed to become a WWE guy before you'd get called up. But in many ways, like talents like yourself, like I wonder whether if your run had just continued with NXT, whether actually that may have been better than being called up to the main roster, because it felt like some of these guys, some guys got called up and actually got lost in the shuffle of Raw and SmackDown, whereas actually on NXT, they were like Bobby Roode being a great example. Like he was NXT until he got called up, and it kind of fizzled. How did you feel about that period and kind of going up to main roster?
Obviously I was excited for the opportunity to go up to the main roster. When we got up there, things changed with the Forgotten Sons, and I had the opportunity to work with Elias. And once again, it was one of those moments where I kind of like TNA, where after the Elias feud, I'd had 2 sit downs with Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis in regards to the babyface run they wanted me to do, cutting my hair, trimming my beard, all that stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm on board. Like, I want to change my look up anyway. It's been the same for many, many years. And after the Elias feud, I feel like he and I put on 3 quality matches. We had one of the live shows in Dallas, Texas. And after that, it was just kind of like you said, you got lost in the shuffle. And they never, like, I'm a firm believer, Ben, like if you work for me and I have an issue with you, instead of not saying anything at all and just kind of putting you on the back burner, let's talk about what happened here. But that's the entertainment industry. And I've learned that after 23 years. But after the Elias feud, it was kind of like, oh, here's Jaxson Ryker working main event matches against, I loved working with Cedric and those guys, but it was just, there was no, and I was trying to pitch ideas one after another to the writers. I'm not, and I don't get bitter. I've never been a bitter person. There's times where I wish my career would have went a certain way, but I'm a firm believer that all things happen for a reason. There's a reason it happened the way it did. And, but I do wish I'd have got more opportunity on the main roster. But sometimes I think, maybe I should have just stayed at NXT, like as a singles competitor or the Forgotten Sons, but I don't know. I think Vint or Hunters maybe saw like our style meshed more with the main roster style. He had at the time like Adam Cole, those guys were just all over the place. Ring of Honor style in a way, and like our style just didn't work like that. But then again, the love of the joy of pro wrestling is you're going to have those styles clash where they still work together. I mean, you look at the Attitude Era, there's so many different types of wrestlers that work, with one another who are different, and it still worked. But I don't know.
But it's all bigger picture stuff, isn't it? As you say, I mean, you've traveled the world, you made a name for yourself in pro wrestling. You did WrestleMania, like you ticked off a lot of those 5-year-old boy dreams, haven't you? So, and then you move on. I mean, talking of kind of where you are now, I mean, clearly it's very clear from kind of speaking with you and following you on social and stuff. And obviously, I was introduced to you via a fantastic couple of conversations you had with good friend of the show, Terry Skaggs, and his Testimonies with Terry podcast.
Yes.
Obviously faith is much like it is for Elias. You were talking about Elias earlier. Like faith is obviously a real guiding light in your life, like it is for me. I had Lodi on the show a little while back, and we talked about the weight room revival sessions. Do you feel like you're just more confident talking about your faith now that you're kind of outside of the wrestling industry and you can just be yourself more?
Well, there was a time, even kind of towards the end of my career, where I started talking about it more. I realized that like I wasn't going to be ashamed of it. I wasn't going to worry about what people thought about it. Definitely, I do a lot more things now because schedule wise, as far as like we got a big youth ministry coming up in August, a youth retreat that me and a bunch of friends in Tennessee do. So, I think after a certain part of my life, I realized like I can't be ashamed of my faith, like because wrestling one day is going to be dead and gone. Acting career for what I had is going to be dead and gone one day. But, my relationship with Jesus Christ is always going to remain until the day I die, and why not share that if I can help somebody else, whether they believe or not, and it's not me thumping a Bible and pushing it down their throat. It's just me being who I am as a person and saying, well, this is what helped me change. And being a part of like stuff with Lodi, man, the weight room revival is just, I have a passion for like speaking to men and speaking to kids, because I feel like in our society, especially with what I work with now, I see a lot of beaten, broken men and a lot of kids who are fatherless and in trouble. And just, that could have been me. I mean, that could have been me easily. But I think that just being able to do some stuff like with Lodi, with the weight room revival, getting a chance to share Jesus any certain way, whether it be my social media, because you don't know what one post is going to do. It's never, I put some videos up before where random person would email me and just start talking to me about situations they're going through. And I never met them before in my life. And that's really what it's about. It's just about helping somebody and them seeing that, or even like as a performer, as an old WWE wrestler, someone going, okay, well, it's okay as a celebrity to talk about your faith. Like some people aren't going to like it, but just like anything else, some people aren't going to like it or agree, but it's okay to do that.
That's what's interesting, because I have the longest time where I never spoke about faith in working in business. You know, I never talked about what, you know, there was like Ben Monday to Friday, and then there was Ben at church on Sunday. And you know, I love doing this because, you know, I've from yourself to Lodi to Lex Luger to Mark Mero to Kurt Angle, like to Lillian Garcia, like there's so many there's so many like strong Christian voices now within wrestling, but everyone shares the same viewpoint that you don't hit people over the head with the Bible with it. You just talk about the light that's there in your life. Like Sting's a great example of that. Like he's been quite open about speaking about his faith, but that doesn't dilute the Sting brand. It's just an element of Steve Borden, the man. And that for me is like, if I can bring it into a conversation like this, great. But I certainly don't want to alienate anyone who's listening to feel like this is like a Christian podcast. I'm drawn towards these conversations because I just find it really interesting. I think there's real power in anyone in entertainment. And I'm not saying, you know, it has to be the Christian faith, but anyone in entertainment to share their faith and what guides them. It's interesting because like in the 80s, you know, what was Hogan? He was all say your prayers, kids. And it was, and then a point came where you just kind of weren't allowed to talk about religion anymore. It was uncool to have faith. And it just feels like we're starting to move back to a world where, you know, it doesn't have to be Christianity, but it just feels like we've moved to a world where you're allowed to be open again and say like, yeah, this is what I believe. And you don't have to believe it. That's cool. But for me, it's done great things in my life. And that's where I am with God and with Jesus. For me, really big part of my life. I'm not saying to anyone else has to be for yours, but I'm always interested in these, you know, seeing other people. Like I've spoken to Elias a lot recently. Like I like talking to other guys who are just happy to talk about where they are in their faith journey.
Oh yeah, man. Elias is a good buddy of mine. We speak a couple of times a week, and that was one of those things when I came to the main roster. Like we latched on about we roomed together, we'd travel together, we'd talk about, you know, the Bible, and it's just it's cool. I'm glad to see him doing what he's doing as well, as far as, you know, and now outside of the WWE, really sharing his faith. Because he's a good person. So
he's a good dude, and he does a great job. Like even if he's on TikTok and he's kind of sharing a Bible verse or whatever, like lots of people will comment on those live TikToks, and people might kind of start making comments about his wrestling days or might start being rude to one another. He does a really good job of moderating those conversations in a very brotherly way, but also in a way that's kind of like, if that carries on, we're going to need to stop this now, kind of thing. He's great at what he does. I've got a lot of time for Elias. Good dude.
Oh yeah, yes sir. I agree. So
well, look, just to kind of bring this to a close, when it comes to your kind of wrestling life, Chad, what are you proudest of when you look back?
I think I'm just proud, Ben, of a 5-year-old boy from a small town of Hickory, North Carolina, just chasing a dream. Like I sacrificed a lot of family time, you know, a lot of personal time to chase this dream. But I think I'm very proud of just kind of sticking to what I wanted to do. You know, I was made fun of as a kid. Sometimes by family members saying I would never do it, but they were the same family members that would come to shows when I did it. And I think remaining true to myself, like never really, what I say, selling my soul for professional wrestling, but just reaching towards the goal, achieving what I did, making it to WWE, you know, the short stint I had there, 4 years. I can look back when I'm 80 and go, man, I've lived a really cool life. I have to remind myself of that sometimes because, you know, law enforcement, you don't make WWE money. you don't make WWE money. But at the same time, I like when I'm 80, if the Lord allows me to live that long, just kind of sitting going, man, you've done some really, really cool stuff. And I think as far as, you know, what I can be proud of is just really I feel like the legacy I left in pro wrestling. I still have young fans or even young wrestlers now come up when I'm doing a signing and start talking to me. And one of two things, I had one, it was about 18 years old, that shook my hand and said, because of me, he wanted to be a pro wrestler. And I'm like, That made me feel old, first of all. But you also, yeah. And I think, sorry, I think just sticking to who I was as a person, being true to myself, and just chasing it, man. Just living it, enjoying it, soaking every moment in. The friends I've made, places I've seen, it's just been a cool career.
And you might not be making WWE money, but you're also not doing a WWE travel schedule now, are you? So you're actually at home with your daughter, staying in one place, which must offset the balance.
It is, because the travel, man, like, started to get really, really intense, especially in that 2020 time frame when everything was shutting down, and it was really rough. It just got to where it was not fun anymore. Hard on my body. And real quick, I'll mention that. Like, people say, "Why did you leave pro wrestling?" Well, I always told myself, growing up, getting into the business, when I felt like it was time to walk away, I would walk away on my own terms. I didn't want to be in my 50s. God bless guys like Ricky Morton and these guys who could still do this. But I said, if my body starts to hurt and I feel like it's time to walk away, I want to walk away healthy. And right around, I'm 42 now, right around my last year in WWE, I felt like every bump I was getting hit with a ball bat. And it just took days to recuperate. And it just got to the point where it was not fun. Like, the crowds were fun, the entertainment aspect was fun, but the hurting part, I was like, I need to enjoy my child. So I started really thinking after WWE stint, I was like, I think it's time to walk away on my own terms. And that's what I did. And I'm glad that I could do that healthy.
Yeah, not many get to do that, do they? And I think, but you've got to look ahead to, like, throwing a football around with your grandchildren and stuff, haven't you? And actually still being here to watch your daughter's moments. And I know wrestling can be an intoxicating business, because you can never reach the pinnacle. Even if you win the world championship at WrestleMania, there's still the next night, isn't there? There's no end to wrestling until the point that you decide there's an end.
So much stress involved to it. And Austin spoke about that. I watched a documentary on him not too long ago, and he talked about that. It doesn't matter where you are, you always want to be higher, and the stress levels just get to you. But yeah, so I'm healthy, been out almost a year now. Had my retirement match in 2023 with my best friend, Casey Cage, who we used to do a podcast together. And it just felt right, man. The crowd was there. I went out right, and I have no regrets.
Oh, I love that. Well, look, thank you so much for giving up your time today. I could talk to you all day, but it's awesome to kind of travel through your life in a whistle-stop fashion. Couple of thanks I always make at the end, Chad. So first is my producer, Jeff Easton from Tall Lake Productions, for bringing Wrestling Life to life. Thank you to everyone who's checked out this episode today. Please do subscribe, tell a friend, and help us to grow. And most of all, Chad, thank you to you for giving up your time and for all the memories you've given us.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate you reaching out months ago and setting this up, and it's been a pleasure. I don't do a lot of shows anymore just because time-wise, but it's been an honor to sit and talk to you, not only as a fan, but as a friend and a brother in Christ as well.
Well, in which case, I think I should say a biggest thank you to Terry for hooking us up as well, because without Terry, it's made never happen. So, yeah, another shout out. Testimonies for Terry, whether you're a Christian or not, or you're just interested in exploring faith. His show is incredible. It's my go-to podcast each and every week, and that guy's just got such a skill and such a good heart. So, check out our brother Terry. But yeah, we'll be back soon for more real talk from real talent. So until then, be good to each other. If you can, pay it forward. This has been Wrestling Life with Ben Veal. See ya.